This game that we get to talk about right now is an absolute treat. I have been waiting all day to record this. I record this on Sunday night. You're listening to it on Monday morning. And I have been excited to talk about this game since I was watching it. And I mean, you talk about running the gamut of emotions. Bama at home against Georgia, two powerhouses. You get the whole storylines. We talked about it last week. Kalen DeBoer, Kirby's smart. Kirby's record against Alabama. Was it just against Nick Saban or was it a Bama problem? All the different angles. And then the game freaking delivered, man. And I got to tell you, it's my favorite thing about this sport is when the game delivers on the hype, what we want, what we hope for, what we dream for. When the game delivers, it is absolutely perfect. And I thought Saturday night was perfect. So here's what I wanted to do. I'm going to try to go through the reasons of why I thought that was such an amazing game. Okay. So the first reason or pillar of reasons here is just like the obvious emotional reasons. It was a phenomenal game. The atmosphere was incredible. And it wasn't that the game was being lost as much as it was the game was being won. And all of us maybe intrinsically is the right word. I'm not sure if I'm using that right. We gravitate towards these games. I think that any sport, by the way, but this can be college football, it can be anything. We gravitate towards the games where plays are being made versus not made, right? Sloppy games that are close are not great games to watch, and they don't get our emotions going like they did on Saturday night because that game was incredible. It was incredible, the plays that were being made and everything that was going on. When you see two really great opponents, and you know that they're really good in their field. And we know this about Alabama and Georgia. We know, in particular after Saturday night, that these are two of the best teams in college football. And then we get to see what they're made of. That's what I love. That's what I love. I love when you get to see what a team is actually made of, deep down in their soul. Do they have any grit? Do they have determination? Do they have resiliency? All these things. And that was tested for both teams on Saturday night. And then they both answered. And it's just like chef's kiss, like, bravo. It's like standing ovation. Let's play another quarter. I love it, man. I love it. Freaking love this sport. Again, had to wear the hat. I had to wear the hat because it rang every single note. It hit every note of why I love this sport. By the way, Bryant Denny looked to be incredible. I'm watching on a little freaking TV, 30,000 feet in the air with bad audio in the headset, and I'm just like loving it. I'm clapping. I'm rooting for both teams. I'm just like, plays are being made. I'm like, yeah, the guy next to me thinks I'm an absolute psychopath. It's like, hey, if you were in seat 3E on United from Denver, Orange County on Saturday night, apologies, but I was loving life. In 3F. That's right. So that's the emotional reasons. And it's everything that I love about the sport. But more so it's that you get to see, it's like you peer deep down into the soul of the team and you get to see what are you actually made of? Does your team have some chemistry to it? Does it have some culture to it? Does it have some belief? Does it have some determination? And then when both of them answer that to the affirmative, it's like, oh, it's so good. The only thing that rivals that is like a heavyweight boxing match when both the guys dig down deep. Like Wilder Fury kind of was like that. Both of them knock each other down, and you're like, that's amazing, right? But this was to that level, or even more so, because both teams just answered the bell. So that's the emotional reasons. Number two, let's get into this. And this is what also makes a great game, and that's when individuals play their best. When we get the stars answering the call of greatness with great play, that's, again, like what I love most about not only this sport, but any sport. And this one was certainly that. Jalen Milroe, nearly 500 total yards of offense and 4 touchdowns. Hello, New York, for Jalen Milroe. Ryan Williams, 17 years old. Dude can't even go in and buy himself anything. I mean, what can you do at 17? Nothing. And Ryan Williams is out there making like incredible plays on the biggest stage. Carson Beck answers the bell, plays horrible in the first half, comes back and plays brilliantly in the second half. The defense for Georgia is decimated in the first half. They come back and they play great in the second half. I loved the individual performances and responses. Even in the second half, when it's not going great for Milroe, even though he had a great first half, what do? They answer with the big touchdown. And I'm reminded, like, all of us, when we were kids, we dreamed of doing the things that these guys are doing. And these guys are actually getting to fulfill that. See, this is what's so special, is that they're experiencing all of that for the first time. This is something that maybe it's a unique perspective. I don't know. And maybe you haven't thought about it this way, the way that I think about it. But when I think about these individual performances, like Ryan Williams, just like a few years ago, he's just a sophomore in high school. And yeah, he's really good, and people are telling him he's got a bright future, and he's playing in front of a few thousand people on a Friday night, making ridiculous plays in high school. And I get it. He was the state's best player for basically his whole career in high school in Alabama. But like, he's just dreaming of this moment. And in the back of your mind as an athlete, and this is where, like, I can talk from some experience on this, is like, you have this question in your mind, like, will I be able to answer the bell? Will I be able to go to that level? When greatness is asked of me, will I be able to respond with greatness? And even guys like Ryan Williams or Jalen Milroe or Carson Beck or any of these players that are highly recruited, like, it's still a question in their mind. They have confidence and belief in themselves, but you don't know what's going to happen in those moments. And so when you get to see them perform on those moments and see the sheer joy in the face of these athletes, when for the first time in their lives, they're experiencing something that they've dreamt of, strived for, and worked for forever, it's just special. And so all those individual performances, man, this is what makes it great, and this is what I absolutely love. And don't worry, I'm getting to all these teams. This is just what I loved about the game on Saturday night. I wanted to go kind of crazy just about all this, because let's just remember why we love this sport, and all of these are the reasons. And then the third reason for me, you've got the emotional reasons, you got the teams, you got the grittiness factor of it, you got all of that, right? All the environment of everything that we love about college football. You've got these players, greatness meeting greatness in terms of individual performances. And then there's this third one. And you guys might have already thought about and known and felt and you understand what those first two are, just being sports fans. But then there's this third one that I think is specific to college football, and I think is actually like the point I'm most excited about Saturday night. And that is that you've got two teams on the field that clearly can both win a national championship and simultaneously get beat any Saturday within reason. Think about it. If Georgia plays like they do in the first half against Tennessee, against Texas, they'll get beat. If they play like they do in the second half, they'll win the national championship. And the same can be said for Alabama. If they play like they did in the first half, man, those first like 18, 20 minutes of that game, it was incredible. They'll win the national championship. No one can withstand what they were doing in the first 19, 20, 24 minutes of game time. They just can't. Then the second half, they went away. They play like that, they might get beat. Maybe Tennessee beats them. I don't know. Maybe Oklahoma beats them. I'm not totally sure, but they can get beat. So you have to understand, in college football, I think even more so than in the NFL, is that you have, even with the great teams, high highs and low lows. And we saw both of those from each team in the same game. And you don't always get to see that. You know, a lot of times in college football, we just see blowouts, or we see sloppy play allow people to come back, and so on and so forth. But I thought what you saw is a real clear picture of what makes this sport great. And even to my point about what I've been saying about this point in history that we're at, it's deeper than it's ever been, because these two teams, both of them, they could easily win the national championship, and they could easily get beat two more times in the season. And I think that that's great for the sport. I think it's great for the sport. We saw the high highs from each of these teams, and they were incredible. And we saw the low lows. We did. They were there. The warts that were kind of following these teams into this game, they appeared. And the others took advantage of those warts. And so you've got this idea and this theory that both of these teams are great and yet beatable at any moment. And that's the truth for all of these teams. That's the truth for Texas. That's the truth for Ohio State. That's the truth for Tennessee. That's the truth for Alabama. That's the truth for Georgia. And I think those 5 teams are kind of the 5 best teams. By the way, that's going to be true about Penn State. That's going to be true about Oregon. That's going to be true about any of these teams that we start talking about in the top 10. You know, when you talk about the top 10, because Alabama gets the biggest and best win of the season, I put them at number 1. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't some holes there or some warts shown. Here's my top 10 that I unveiled on Saturday night. I went Bama 1 because of the win. They deserve to be number 1. I went with Texas at number 2 over Ohio State because Texas has a better resume than Ohio State right now. I think those 2 teams are elite teams. I think Tennessee, with their road win over Oklahoma, gets to be at number 4 because Georgia lost a football game and they go at number 5. Penn State then at 6, Oregon at 7. Miami goes all the way back down. They were at 4 last week for me, but that win against Virginia Tech win, air quotes, I'll get to that later. Miami goes down to 8. Mizzou jumps back up into 9. And to be quite honest with you, after you get past 6, 7 right there, it starts to be a real crapshoot. We definitely have a clear top 5 teams in the country, I think. And I think Tennessee has joined that top 5. And then you start to have some questions, although Penn State looks pretty good. And then Oregon at their best, you would expect they can play with any of those teams up high. So there's the top 10. So it leaves us with this question then. I went through the reasons. I've got the 3 reasons, just the emotional reasons of why I love college football and that environment in that game, the individual reasons of why I love college football, seeing these guys star when greatness is asked and greatness is then performed. And then you've got this idea that both of these teams can win it all and get beat at any moment, which I think is fantastic. And so now you get to ask the question, what do we think about these 2 teams coming out of that game? Okay. Now it gets a little bit more interesting. And this is why I did not want to start with this, because what I'm about to say I think is more controversial than what I just said. I think everybody tracks with the 3 reasons that I just said about celebrating what was an incredible game, because it was. Now, if you ask me about the 2 teams coming out of the game, we get over the emotional high of the game and we sit down and we think to ourselves, okay, let's put ourselves in Kirby Smart's shoes. Let's put ourselves in Kalen DeBoer's shoes, Carson Beck's shoes, Jalen Milroe's shoes. And to me, to be quite honest, it's actually a pretty obvious conclusion. Now, it might not be obvious to everybody, but to me, it kind of stood out as I'm evaluating this game. And that is, I feel better about Georgia than I do about Alabama coming away from that game. I get it. Alabama won, which is why I've rewarded them with that top spot in my rankings. But I also believe that in this sport, and candidly in life, but in this sport in particular, the cream generally rises to the top. So if you asked me about any sort of game, I will tell you that the more snaps that are played, the more times that you play, the more opportunities that you get, generally speaking, the odds are going to favor the better team. So as time goes on, what you will see is one team start to become a better team or reveal that they are the better team than the other. I believe that's what was starting to happen in the second half. Now, if you're an Alabama fan, you are going to be incensed that I have this opinion. And absolutely, you deserve to feel that way because you won the football game. And keep in mind what I said. If Alabama plays well at their ceiling, there is no doubt that they can win the national championship. There is no doubt in my mind. However, as the game went along, what you got was you got over the emotion of the first, quarter and a half. You got over the emotion of the environment. And what I saw in the second half was a defense in Georgia figure out the offense in Alabama. What I saw in the second half was a team in Georgia start to pick apart the weakness that I actually talked about that Alabama has, which is their secondary. And so that's why I'm sitting here. And if I'm Carson Beck, I'm sitting here on Sunday and I'm thinking to myself, please get me another chance at that game. Please just get me Bama. I don't care. I'll play him in the parking lot. I just want one more quarter, one more snap. We just ran out of time. That's what I'm feeling if I'm Carson Beck and Kirby Smart for that matter, because the defense had largely figured them out until that long, ridiculous play from Ryan Williams, which was sensational. On the flip side, if I'm Alabama, I'm like, man, we kind of escaped. They had us. They were coming back. We couldn't do anything. We weren't doing anything offensively. Maybe we got too conservative, or maybe they kind of figured us out a little bit. They hemmed in our run game. They kept Jalen Milroe from getting the edge. And now all of a sudden you're starting to think to yourself like, I don't want to have to do that again. Can we beat them again? I don't know, man. Can we replicate that first half again? I'm not sure. You take a look at this and you look at what happened in that game. Beck took some shots in that second half, and it started to pay off. And I thought that the secondary was where Alabama was vulnerable, and sure enough, 17 passes were over 20 yards downfield. 17, 14 of them in the second half. They saw it. They saw the weakness that I saw in the film, and they said, we're going downtown. 14 passes traveled 20 yards or more in the second half, most by a quarterback in the Kirby Smart era. Now, he only completed 5 of the 17, but they were all in the second half. And there were a couple of drops, by the way, even early in that game that probably could have stemmed the tide of what was going on with the momentum early in that game. Beck dropped a couple of beautiful passes deep down the field early, and they were dropped. Meanwhile, there's Bama's defense, and that secondary is going to be an issue moving forward. They're going to have to go play Tennessee. Tennessee's going to take shots down the field. They gave up 6 plays of at least 30 yards, and the only other time that that's happened in the last 10 years, last year's Texas loss. So I think that there's an issue there, and that's why I feel a bit better about Georgia coming out of that game than I do about Alabama. I think that the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is that Georgia has a much more difficult road to hoe in the SEC than Alabama does. So Georgia's remaining SEC schedule is going to be Auburn, Mississippi State. Those aren't going to be terrible, but then they've got to go to Texas, Florida, which will be fine, at Ole Miss, which is not easy, and then Tennessee. So going to Texas is going to be incredibly difficult. I have Texas rated higher. As high as Alabama. They're 2. Alabama's 1 in my rankings. So now Georgia's going to have to go and do that all over again, and that place is going to be on fire. Meanwhile, Alabama's remaining schedule is not as difficult because they don't have to play Texas. So they've got to go to Tennessee. I think that's a game that Tennessee might win. Missouri, they have to play Missouri. They've got to go to LSU, and they've got to go to Oklahoma. So nothing easy, but because they avoid Texas, it's a little bit, I would say, easier than Georgia. The one thing that Bama has in their back pocket here is the fact that without divisions, Georgia can't just say like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll win the East and we'll get to Atlanta. There's a chance now, based on what happens with the rest of the teams in the SEC, that Georgia can't even get back to Atlanta, even if they were to win all of their games. Now, if they win out because they would get a win against Tennessee and Ole Miss has already lost, that would be a second loss for Ole Miss. They likely will go to Atlanta, but it's not a guarantee. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.